Midnight in Merrow Bend is a held breath. The bank sign throws cold blue light across an empty lot. And under that light, an old woman stands very still while three men decide what to do with her. She has her hand on the machine. The screen glows. She is not screaming because screaming is what they want. And after 78 years, Fay Whitlock has learned the difference between fear and surrender. Her knuckles are white on the strap of a vinyl purse. The youngest of the three is close enough now that she can smell cigarettes and rain on him. 2 streets over, a dog lifts its head off the floor of a parked truck and stares at the dark windshield as if it can see through brick. The man inside the truck did not hear anything. He only watched the dog. And when the dog stood, ears forward, a low sound moving in its chest like a stone rolling, he reached for the door handle without quite knowing why. If this story stays with you, stay with it to the end. Some nights the right thing arrives on 4 legs before it ever arrives on 2. Marcus Hale had not planned to be on Cedar Street at midnight. He had planned to be asleep. He had been awake instead, the way he was awake most nights now, sitting in the cab of his truck outside the closed feed store with a cold cup of coffee and a dog who never asked him why they were there. The town had a sickness to it lately. He could not have told you the name of it. He only knew that for 3 weeks the streets had felt watched, and watched streets had a smell to a man who had spent 11 years learning to read the air of a place before he walked into it. The dog's name was Bocephus. Marcus called him Boo. He was a working German shepherd, tan and black, 80 pounds of muscle and patience, and he had come home from the war the same time Marcus had retired out of the same program, papers and all. They had served 2 tours together. Bo had pulled a wounded private out from under a collapsed wall with his teeth in the man's collar, and Marcus had carried Bo 2 miles with a fragment in the dog's shoulder, and neither of them talked about it because dogs do not talk, and Marcus had mostly stopped. The eyes of someone who never truly stopped scanning rooms, roads, exits, or people. He had those eyes. So did the dog. Bo rarely moved without reason. Marcus trusted that more than words. So when the dog came off the seat and pressed his nose to the cold glass and made the sound that meant something is wrong out there, Marcus did not reason with it. He opened the door. Merrow Bend was a town of maybe 900 people in the foothills, a single main street, a diner, a hardware store, a stone church, and a bank that had changed its name 3 times in 10 years as bigger banks ate smaller ones. Marcus had grown up 40 miles from here and had come back 18 months ago to bury an uncle, and had simply never left because there was nothing waiting for him anywhere else, and the rent on the little house at the end of Quarry Road was cheap, and the silence suited him. He kept to himself. He fixed engines for cash. He walked the dog. People in town nodded at him and did not press, which was the kindest thing they could have done. He led Bo out, and the dog went down Cedar at a fast trot, not a run, the controlled gait of an animal who knows exactly where he is going. Marcus followed at a jog. The cold bit through his jacket. His breath came out in clouds. He came around the corner of the closed insurance office, and he saw the bank lot, and he saw the blue light, and he saw the old woman against the machine with 3 men around her, and everything in him that had ever been a Marine went quiet and sharp at once. The dog reached her first. Bo did not bark. He did not lunge. He came across that lot like weather, low and certain, and he planted himself between the old woman and the nearest man, with his shoulders squared and his head down and a sound coming out of him that was not loud but that you felt in your sternum. The youngest man jerked back so fast he tripped on the curb. The dog did not chase. The dog held the line. That was the whole of it. 80 pounds of trained restraint, standing exactly where a body needed to be. By the time Marcus crossed the lot, the three men had backed into a loose, uncertain knot near a dark sedan, and the old woman had turned around, and her face under the blue light was not the face of a victim. It was the face of someone who had been waiting a long time for a witness. "Step back from her," Marcus said. He did not raise his voice. He had learned a long time ago that the men who raise their voices are the men who are not sure they will be obeyed. The tallest of the three, a man with a shaved head and a long wool coat too good for the rest of him, looked at Marcus and then at the dog, then made a show of holding his hands up. "Easy, friend. No trouble here." The lady dropped her card. "We were helping." "She wasn't dropping her card," Marcus said. "You calling me a liar. I'm telling you what I see." What he saw was three grown men who had cornered a woman 50 years their senior at a cash machine at midnight, and a fourth thing, too, which was that the tall one was not afraid of Marcus. He was afraid of the dog, the way everyone was rightly afraid of the dog, but he looked at Marcus the way a man looks at a problem he expects to solve later. That look stayed in Marcus's head longer than he expected. The old woman spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady, dry, a little amused, which surprised him. "I'd thank you to call the sheriff's office," she said to Marcus. "Not to them. Carl Mendez, he's the deputy on nights. Tell him Fay Whitlock is at the bank." Again he filed the word away. The tall man's jaw worked. He glanced at his two companions, and something passed between them. And then he smiled, and it was a smile that had been practiced in a mirror. "There won't be a need for that," he said. "We're leaving. You all have a good night now." He said it the way a man says a thing he intends to take back. They got in the sedan, all three unhurried, making the unhurrying a point of pride, and they pulled out of the lot and turned north, and the taillights shrank and were gone. Marcus stood there with the dog leaning warm against his leg and the old woman watching him, and he realized his hands had not unclenched. "You're the one with the truck," she said. "Lives out Quarry Road. Fixes the Hendricks boys' tractor." "Marcus," he said, "I know who you are. I've lived in this town since before your mother was born, son. I know everybody." She bent stiffly and held out the back of her hand to the dog, who sniffed it and then sat, which from Bo was a benediction. "And who is this gentleman, Bo?" "Bo." She scratched the dog behind one ear, and the dog allowed it. "Well, Bo, you're a good deal faster than the law in this county." I'll remember that. She would not let Marcus drive her home. She would not let him call the deputy, not that night. Said it would only mean an hour of standing in the cold, filling out a paper that went in a drawer. But she let him walk her the 4 blocks to a narrow house with a sagging porch and a single lamp burning in the front window. And when she got to her door, she turned and looked at him for a long moment, sizing him the way you'd size a tool you were thinking of buying. "They'll be back," she said. "Not tonight, but they'll be back. You understand? That's not the first time." "How many times?" "Third," she said. "First time they were polite. Second time they weren't. Tonight they brought a third man." She said it the way you'd report the weather. "You want to know why?" "I do." She studied him another moment. Then she said, "Come for coffee tomorrow. Bring the dog. I don't tell my business on a porch in the cold." The door closed. The lamp went out. Marcus stood in the dark with Bo, and the cold, and the print of those 3 men still hanging in the air, and for the first time in 18 months, something in him had a direction. He did not sleep that night either. But It was a different kind of not sleeping. Fay Whitlock's kitchen smelled of cinnamon and old wood. The house was small and very clean and full of the kind of objects that mean nothing to a stranger and everything to the person who keeps them. A man's reading glasses on a windowsill, folded though no man lived there now. A row of mason jars, a wall of photographs, going back so far, the oldest ones were the color of weak tea. She poured coffee into cups that did not match, and set a plate of cornbread between them, and lowered herself into a chair with the care of a body that has learned to negotiate with itself. Beau lay down under the table with a sigh, his chin on Marcus's boot. "My husband bought this house in 1961, she said. "Eldon, he's been gone 9 years. We never had children that lived. So it's just me and the house and 12 acres behind it that runs down to the creek." She drank her coffee. "That creek is the whole reason 3 men cornered me at a cash machine, though I expect you'd never guess it to look at it." She told it plainly, the way the voice in a man's head tells him a hard truth he already half knows. There was a company. It had come into the county 2 years ago calling itself a development group, and it had a name that changed depending on which paper you were reading. And it had a man named Gerald Stroud who did its talking. Stroud wore good coats and shook hands and called everyone by their first name within a minute of meeting them. He had bought up land all along the creek, the cheap way, finding the people who were behind on something or sick or alone, and arriving at exactly the moment they were weakest, with an offer that felt like rescue. 6 families had sold in 18 months. The creek frontage, it turned out, was worth a great deal to people who wanted to put a bottling operation on the water rights, and Fay's 12 acres sat square in the middle of the stretch they needed. I told him, "No," the first time he came, she said. I told him no the second time. The third time he brought a folder of papers and a number that would have made a younger woman cry, and I told him no a third time, and that's when he stopped sending the nice version of himself. She refilled Marcus's cup without asking. A funny thing about money like that. It doesn't change a man into something he wasn't. It just gives him permission to stop pretending. The men at the bank work for him, or for whoever he works for. He's careful, that one. He never says a thing you could write down. But a tax notice came to my mailbox last month that says I owe 4 years of back assessment on the acreage I have never once been late on $11,000 due in 60 days, and the assessor's office can't tell me where it came from. And the same week, a man I never saw before started parking across the street to watch my house. And then they started finding me at the bank at night when I go to move what little I have where they can't garnish it. She set her cup down. Her hand was steady, but Marcus saw what it cost her to keep it steady. "I'm not a fool, son. I know what's happening. They want me frightened enough to sign. They figure a woman my age alone, no family, they outlast me. They're patient. They've done it before. $11,000, Marcus said, in 60 days, 51 now. Years of combat had trained him to feel his pulse slow when other men's quickened, but years of coming home to a country that had room for men like Gerald Stroud had done something else entirely to him, and it was that second thing he felt, now low and cold. He looked at the old woman across the cornbread and the mismatched cups, and the dog asleep on his boot, and he thought about the 18 months he had spent fixing engines for cash, and walking a dog and waiting to feel like he belonged anywhere. And he understood, the way you understand a thing all at once, that he had just stopped waiting. "I'm not signing anything," Fay said, mistaking his silence. "I want to be clear about that. I don't need rescuing. I buried a husband and ran this place alone for 9 years, and I will run it 9 more. I told you my business because you asked, and because that dog of yours stood where the law wouldn't. That's all." "I know," Marcus said. "Then what are you sitting there thinking?" "I'm thinking $11,000 didn't come from nowhere," he said. "Somebody filed it. Somebody's name is on it." Faye looked at him a long moment. Then for the first time she smiled, and it took 20 years off her face. "Drink your coffee," she said. "It's getting cold." The diner on Main Street was called the Bluebird, and it was run by a woman named Donna Reyes, who had fed half the town on credit at one time or another, and forgotten more secrets than most people ever learned. Marcus went there the next morning because it was the one place in Marrow Bend where everything that happened in Marrow Bend eventually got said out loud, and because Faye had told him to. "Donna knows who sold and who didn't," she'd said, "and she's angry about it. Anger's useful." He took a booth by the window with Bo lying alert at his feet, and Donna brought him eggs he hadn't ordered and sat down across from him without being asked. "You're Faye's dog man," she said. It was not a question. "The town moved fast. She told me what your shepherd did at the bank. Whole town's talking about it by noon, you understand. That's how it works here. I need to know about Stroud." Donna's mouth went flat. She glanced toward the kitchen, then back. "I'll tell you what I know, which is more than I should and less than I'd like." She lowered her voice, though the diner was nearly empty. "The Crandalls sold in the spring. Good people, 40 years on the river road, and old Pete had a stroke, and the medical bills came, and Stroud was at their door inside a month. How do you think he knew that? You tell me." "The Beale place, the Ocoa place. The little church camp, down at the bend that hadn't made its insurance in 2 years. Every one of them. The minute they were down, here comes Gerald Stroud with his folder and his first names." She wiped the same clean spot on the table twice. "And every one of them got a notice. First, a tax thing, a lien thing, a code violation thing, something official, something that scared them. Then he shows up like the answer to a prayer." "The notices," Marcus said. "Where do they come from? That's the thing nobody can ever say. County offices swear they didn't send them, but they're on county paper. They've got county numbers on them." Donna shook her head. "There's somebody inside, is what people think and won't say. Somebody in the assessor's office or the recorder's, feeding him names, feeding him notices. But you can't prove it, and the families who'd have proof already sold and moved and want to forget it ever happened." The action then question pattern of the morning settled into him. "Somebody inside." He turned it over. "Who runs the assessor's office?" "Harriet Pell's the assessor, and she's 80 if she's a day, and half blind and honest as Sunday." Donna paused. "But she's got a deputy assessor she hired 2 years back, young fella. Real helpful. Came from out of county. Name of Travis Knoll." She said the name like it tasted bad. Funny how the notices started right about when he did. The bell over the door rang. A man came in, stamped the cold off his boots, and Donna stood up fast and went back behind the counter with the smoothness of long practice. Marcus did not turn around. In the reflection of the window glass, he watched the man take a stool and order coffee, and he watched Bo, and the dog had lifted his head off the floor and was looking at the newcomer's back with his ears forward and a stillness that Marcus had learned to read better than any document. Bo moved first, always. When the thing was wrong, the dog did not growl this time. He simply watched, the way he watched the men who had not yet done anything but were going to. Marcus paid for the eggs he hadn't ordered, left more than they cost, and walked out with the dog at his knee. As he passed the window from the outside, he got one clear look at the man at the counter. Shaved head. Long wool coat, too good for the rest of him, the tallest of the three from the bank. The man watched him go, smiled the practiced smile, lifted his coffee in something that was almost a toast. That answer stayed in Marcus's head. Longer than he expected. They were not hiding anymore. They wanted him to know they had seen him. That was a choice, and choices told you things. He spent the next 4 days the way a patient man spends days. He did not confront anyone. He did not raise his voice in any office. He fixed 2 trucks and a generator, and he walked his dog past the assessor's office twice a day at hours when he could see who came and went, and he learned the shape of Travis Knowles' days the way he had once learned the shape of a road he was going to have to cross. Noel was young, soft-handed, drove a truck that cost more than the job paid, and ate lunch alone in his vehicle every day at the gravel. Turn out by the creek where he could watch the water, which was either sentiment or planning. On the 5th day, Faye called him to her house with a tremor in her voice he had not heard before, and when he got there with the dog, she handed him an envelope that had been left in her mailbox with no stamp. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a foreclosure schedule, official-looking, county-headed, listing her property, listing the $11,000, listing a sale date that was 3 weeks sooner than the law allowed. At the bottom, where no honest document would ever say such a thing, someone had written by hand, "It does not have to be this way. Call Mr. Stroud." Faye sat in her kitchen chair with her hands folded in her lap, and for the first time looked her age, looked tired all the way down, and the dog crossed the room and put his head in her lap without being told, and she rested one hand on the broad, warm skull and closed her eyes. "They want me to know they can make the date say whatever they want it to say," she said quietly. "That's the message, not the money. The message is, the paper belongs to us now, Faye, and there's nothing you can do." "It's a forgery," Marcus said. He was looking at the document. "The seal's wrong. The date's illegal. This came out of somebody's printer, not a courthouse. It doesn't matter if it's real. It matters if it scares me." "Then we make it matter that it's a forgery," Marcus said. She opened her eyes. "And how do we do that, son? You and me and a dog. He's got money and lawyers and somebody on the inside, and I've got 12 acres and 51 days and a back that hurts when it rains." 46 days, Marcus said. "You've got 6 families he did this to before you. You've got a deputy who keeps getting called to the bank at midnight and is tired of it. You've got a diner owner who's angry and remembers everything. You've got a forged county document in your hand with somebody's fingerprints on the choices in it." He set the paper down on the table, gently, like it was evidence because it was. "A man who fakes a date this badly is a man who thinks nobody's ever going to check. The whole thing only works if everybody he picks is alone. You're not alone anymore. That's the part he got wrong." Faye looked at him for a long time. The dog breathed under her hand. "You sound like Eldon," she said finally. "He was a stubborn man, too. It killed him slower than it should have." She wiped her eyes once briskly the way a person does who has decided to be done crying. All right, Marcus Hale. Tell me what a stubborn man does." What a stubborn man did was build a thing carefully in the open where it could not be made to disappear in a drawer. Marcus went to see Deputy Carl Mendez, not at the station, but at his house on his day off, with the dog and a thermos of coffee and the forged document in a clean folder. Mendez was a heavy, careful man in his 50s who had grown up in Marrow Bend and policed it for 26 years, and had the particular weariness of a good man in a small place who has watched things go wrong. He could not stop. He looked at the document for a long time at his kitchen table. "I know it's wrong," he said finally. "I've known something was wrong for a year. I get called to that bank twice a month for Fay and for two other old folks. Stroud's circling. And every time I get there, it's over, and there's nothing to write up. A man standing in a parking lot isn't a crime. A coat watching a house isn't a crime." He pushed the paper back. "But this is a forged county instrument, this. I can do something with, if she'll swear to how she got it." "She will. Then I need every notice. Every one of these things from every family. The Crandalls, the Beals, all of them. If it's one man inside the county feeding Stroud names and printing fake paper, then every notice is going to have the same tell, the same wrong seal, the same font off the real one. Same mistake," repeated Mendez, rubbed his face. "But Marcus, those families sold and left, and they're ashamed. And they don't want to come back and stand next to this. Getting them to talk is going to be the hard part, not the paper." "Let me worry about the families," Marcus said. Here is what he did not say because he did not have the words for it, and because the dog at his feet did not need it said. He had spent 18 months believing he had nothing left to be useful for. He had come home from a war that did not end when the flying stopped, and he had buried the one piece of family he had left, and he had decided, without ever deciding it out loud, that he would do small things in a small town until he ran out of days. And now an old woman with a creek behind her house had handed him a fight that was exactly the size and shape of the thing he was good at, which was not violence, whatever the recruiting posters said. It was this: walking up to frightened people who had given up and standing close enough that they remembered they did not have to be alone. He was good at being the body that held the line. The dog had taught him that the dog was better at it. Between the two of them, he thought they might be enough. It took 11 days to gather the families. Marcus drove 3 counties. He sat on porches and in front rooms with Bo lying patient at his feet, and he did not push, and he did not promise, and one by one the people who had sold to Gerald Stroud took the documents they had been too ashamed to throw away out of drawers and shoe boxes and the bottoms of Bibles, and Donna had been right. They all had the same wrong seal. They all had the same date. A county clerk would never have written. They all had, somewhere on the page, the same small flaw, a county map number transposed in exactly the same way, the signature of a single hand that had made the same mistake 6 times because it had never once imagined anyone would line all 6 up beside each other. Pete Crandall, recovered enough from his stroke to walk with a cane, held his notice in a hand that shook and looked at Marcus with eyes that had given up a year ago and were trying to remember how not to. "We didn't have to sell," he said. "Did we? We were scared, and we didn't have to sell. You weren't alone and didn't know it," Marcus said. "That's all it was. The Beals came. The Oakwas came." The man who'd run the little church camp came a soft-spoken pastor named Iola Frame, who had lost her whole ministry to a forged insurance lapse and had spent a year believing it was her own failing. She held Fay's hand in the Bluebird Diner the morning they all met, 8 families around tables Donna pushed together, and she said grace over coffee and pie. Before anyone said a word about Stroud, and the whole room went quiet under it, and Marcus stood at the back with his dog and felt the town close around the thing like a hand closing around something it meant to protect. It was the most people who had been in one room caring about one thing in Merrill Bend in years. Marcus had not made it happen. He had only walked to the frightened ones one at a time, and the dog had walked with him, and the rest the town had done itself the moment it was given permission. That hit him harder than he expected. Gerald Stroud had not built what he had built by being careless about the thing closest to him. The day after the families met at the Bluebird, the watcher across from Faye's house doubled. The forged sale date, the illegal one, was suddenly real, filed for true at the county recorder's office, under a clerk's stamp, advanced, irreversible, and Faye Whitlock got a certified letter, a real one this time, on real paper that said her 12 acres would be sold at public auction in 9 days. He moved it up, Mendez said, standing in Faye's kitchen with his hat in his hands. Somebody inside pushed it through ahead of the calendar. It's not legal, the notice period's short, but legal takes a lawyer and a judge and a month, and the auction's in 9 days. He's betting we can't stop a real sale faster than he can hold a fake one. His jaw was tight. And the worst of it, Noel's gone. Travis Noel didn't come to work yesterday or today. Cleaned out his desk over the weekend. The one man whose hand is on all 6 forgeries, the one man who could put Stroud's name to the inside job, is in the wind. Without him, it's 6 pieces of paper with a flaw, and no signature anybody'll swear to. He took the proof and ran. The kitchen was very quiet. Faye sat at her table. The plate of cornbread sat untouched. Outside, a cold rain had started, the kind that gets into the bones, and the watcher's car sat at the curb with its wipers going. 9 days, the proof gone. The one hand that connected the forgeries to the man had vanished, and a real auction sat on the calendar like a stone. Faye looked older than Marcus had ever seen her. "I'm tired, son," she said, and it was the truest thing she had said to him. "I've been tired a long time. Maybe Eldon was the stubborn one, and I was just standing next to him." She looked at her own hands. "Maybe it's just 12 acres and a creek, and an old woman ought to know when she's beat." The dog crossed the room. He did not put his head in her lap this time. He sat directly in front of her, squared up the way he had stood in the bank lot, and he looked at her, and he did not move. And after a moment, Faye Whitlock looked back at the dog who had reached her, first on the worst night of her year, and something in her straightened. "He doesn't think I'm beat," she said. "No," Marcus said. "He doesn't." Marcus had been still for a long time. Now he was still in the other way, the way that comes right before a decision. He had been thinking while the rain came down about the gravel turnout by the creek where a soft-handed young man with an expensive truck had eaten lunch alone every day, watching the water. A man does not run far in 9 days when he has no friends, and a face the whole county now knew. A man in the wind goes to ground somewhere. He knows somewhere, he thinks, is his. Noel didn't run far, Marcus said. He ran scared. Scared men go where they feel safe, and that man only ever looked relaxed in one place in this whole county. He stood. The dog stood with him. Stroud thinks the proof left town in Noel's truck, but Noel's the proof. And Bo found 3 men in a parking lot in the dark from 2 streets away. I don't think one frightened bookkeeper is going to be the hard part. He did not find Travis Noel that night, or the next. He found him on the 3rd day, and he found him the patient way by being a man with a dog who walked the creek road at the hours other men didn't, watching for a truck that cost more than its owner made. The turnout by the creek was empty. But 2 miles up on a logging spur, that dead-ended at a hunting cabin Noel's family had owned before Noel was born, a fact Donna produced from the bottomless county memory of the Bluebird. There was the truck, badly hidden under a tarp and a hope. Marcus did not go to the door with the dog showing teeth. That was not how this worked, and it was not who he was, and the law would throw out anything that came of a frightened man cornered. He parked in the open. He let Bo out. The dog sat by the truck, alert, harmless, enormous, and Marcus knocked on the cabin door like a neighbor and stood back where the man inside could see he held nothing. "Travis," he called. "It's the man with the dog. You know the one. Come on out. Nobody here's going to hurt you." That's not what this is. A long silence. Then the door opened a crack, and a young, frightened, exhausted face looked out at the Marine standing easy in the cold and the great, calm dog sitting in the gravel. And Marcus watched the last of the fight go out of Travis Knoll the way air goes out of a thing. "He told me it was just paperwork," No said. His voice cracked. "He told me nobody got hurt. He told me it was just helping deals along." He came out onto the step in his socks, hugging himself in the cold. "And then I saw the list of who was next, and your name wasn't on it. Hers was that old woman, and there was a note about how long she'd likely hold out alone, like she was a tree they were waiting to fall, and I couldn't. I took the files, I was going to burn them, I was going to disappear." He was crying now, openly, the way a young man cries when the structure he built his lies on finally comes down. "I don't know how to undo it." "You don't undo it," Marcus said. "You don't have to. You just have to stand next to it instead of running from it. That's all anybody's asking. You stand where you should have stood the first day." He thought of Pete Crandall on his porch, saying the same true thing back to him. You weren't alone either. You just didn't know it. Travis Knoll had not burned the files. They were in a banker's box on the cabin floor, and they were everything, every notice he had forged, the real county templates he had altered, the emails where Gerald Stroud told him which families to target and when they would be weakest and how much fear was the right amount, and a ledger in Stroud's own careful hand that never said a thing out loud. That turned out to say a great deal when laid beside the forgeries, because the dates matched, the names matched, the whole patient machine of it matched, and a man who never put anything in writing had, it turned out, kept meticulous books on the people he had ruined. Carl Mendez took the box into evidence, with a county attorney standing next to him at Faye's own kitchen table, so it could never be said the chain was broken. And Travis Knoll sat at that same table with a lawyer of his own and told all of it on the record, and Donna brought pie nobody ate, and the dog lay under the table with his chin on Marcus's boot. And outside the cold rain finally stopped. The auction did not happen. It did not happen because a forged-up sale date, advanced illegally with the deputy assessor who pushed it through, now testifying to exactly how and at whose instruction, does not survive a county attorney and a judge. The recorder's office unwound the false filing in an afternoon. The $11,000 in back assessment that had never existed evaporated off Faye Whitlock's account like the lie it had always been. And the bottling company that had wanted the creek so badly when it learned how the land along it had been assembled, when it saw its name might end up beside the word forgery in a courtroom, withdrew so fast it left Gerald Stroud standing alone in a county that finally knew exactly what he was. He did not go to a cell in the end. Marcus had known he wouldn't. Men like Stroud rarely paid the way the families wanted them to. He had a lawyer, too, and the lawyer found him a door, and the company that he had really worked for, the one whose name was harder to spell than to find, settled and severed and made him a problem they no longer had. Stroud left Marrow Bend the way he had come into it, quietly, in a good coat, smiling at people who no longer smiled back. The system that had made him was bigger than the man, and would make another one somewhere else. And Marcus knew that too. But here, in this town, on this creek, the machine had been stopped, and 6 families that had been told they were alone had stood in a row and proved they were not. And that was not nothing. That was, in fact, the whole of it. Goodness did not always get to win the way you'd write it. But it had won the thing in front of it, and the thing in front of it had been an old woman's 12 acres and her right to keep her own back door. The families got hearings. The Crandalls did not get their 40 years back, but they got an apology on county paper and a check that was real. And Pete walked into the Bluebird with his cane and his head up for the first time in a year. Pastor Iola got her church camp returned by a settlement and stood in the rebuilt pavilion that summer and said grace over 100 people. Travis Noel pled to what he had done and got mercy. He had earned by the box, he did not burn, and he stayed in the county, which surprised everyone, and made himself useful in small honest ways, which surprised them more. And Marcus nodded to him on the street the way the town had once nodded to Marcus, which was the kindest thing he could have done. And Fay Whitlock kept her house. Marcus came for coffee, the way he had that first morning, and then he came the next week. And then it stopped being a thing either of them announced. He fixed the porch that had sagged for 9 years. He cleared the deadfall along the creek where Eldon had once meant to put a bench, and then he built the bench, because the old man had meant to, and Fay sat on it in the long evenings with the dog beside her while Marcus worked, and the creek that 3 men had cornered her at a cash machine to steal ran past clean and cold and entirely her own. One evening in early spring, with the last snow gone gray and shrinking under the pines and the light going gold the way it does at the end of a cold day, Fay watched Marcus carry a load of split wood to her porch with the dog trotting alongside. And she said, without preamble, the way old people say the truest things, "You don't have to keep coming. You know, the fight's over. You don't owe me your evenings." Marcus set the wood down. The dog sat against his leg. He looked out at the creek and the 12 acres and the gold light on the water, and he thought about the little rented house at the end of Quarry Road that he had never once thought of as home, and the 18 months he had spent waiting to feel like he was from somewhere. And he understood that the waiting had ended some weeks ago, and he had only just now noticed. "I know I don't owe you anything," he said. "Then why?" He was quiet a moment. The dog leaned warm against his leg. The creek ran. "Because I kept leaving places," he said finally. "My whole life. Soon as a place started to need me, I had a reason to be somewhere else. It felt like strength. It wasn't." He looked at her. "I'm tired of leaving, Fay. I think I'd like to stay somewhere long enough to wear a path to the door." Jacked. Fay Whitlock looked at the big quiet man and the big quiet dog standing in the gold light at the edge of the land she had almost lost, and her eyes were bright, and she did not let them spill because she had decided a long time ago to be done crying, but she let herself smile. "Well," she said, "there's a path here that could use wearing, and the dog likes the creek." The dog, hearing himself discussed, thumped his tail once against the porch board. "Now, if you have stayed with this all the way to here, take this with you when you go." The thing that saved Fay Whitlock was not strength, and it was not even justice, though justice came. It was that on the worst night of her year, when 3 men cornered her in the cold, and the law was an hour away, something good crossed an empty lot, and stood between her and the dark, and did not run, and did not leave. We spend so much of our lives believing we are alone with the thing that frightens us. We are so rarely as alone as we think. There is almost always someone or something closer than we know, already moving toward us across the dark, who will reach us first. Be that for somebody. Stand where the body needs to be. Stay long enough to wear a path to the door. May God keep you and the ones you love. May you never be cornered without a friend who reaches you first. And may you find, late or early, the place that needs you and the courage to stop leaving it. Marcus stayed. The dog stayed. The creek ran on past the house, clean and cold and home, and the lamp in Fay Whitlock's front window stayed lit a long time into the gentle dark.